And welcome to FISM News. I'm Ian Patrick. Now, I usually don't intro these episodes, but today's episode is actually going to be a little bit different. Instead of our usual coverage, we're going to devote our time to an in-depth look at the upcoming 2024 presidential election. Following last week's debate, there is certainly a lot of uncertainty over the next few months and what it will hold, but we're going to try to make sense of the current landscape, as well as break down the major issues that voters will be looking at. Basically, we'll be asking some important questions that are on many Americans' minds as we approach this election season. This includes everything from what the most important issues are shaping up to be to the potential impact of former President Trump's felony conviction. We'll also be revisiting some of the election stories that we've already covered this year, somewhat similar to our year in review episodes that we do around Christmas time. So without further ado, allow me to introduce Renata Kiss as we go into our FISM News 2024 election special. Take it away, Renata.
Thanks for that, Ian. Well, before we jump into everything about the upcoming elections, I suppose we should ask the first question. Who is in the race? A week ago, this seemed to be a pretty straightforward question, but now nearly 4 months from Election Day, there's a lack of clarity surrounding who will end up on the ballot. The Republican side appears to be set after Donald Trump defeated a number of presidential hopefuls and is set to be the presidential nominee. The Democratic ticket, however, seems to be clouded with uncertainty following last week's debate. President Joe Biden was propped up as the Democratic nominee from the beginning, but his performance at the debate highlighted concerns over his age and mental clarity. Democratic insiders and pundits alike have called for Biden to step aside and let someone else run in his place. But Biden and his camp have reiterated that he has no plans to step down.
And over the last few years, Joe has helped heal our country, helping us all recover from the chaos of the last administration.
And I know how to do this job. I know how to get things done. And I know, like millions of Americans know, when you get knocked down, you get back up.
Now, outside the two main parties, we also see Robert F. Kennedy Jr. running as an independent party candidate. But for our purposes, we'll be mainly focusing on Trump and Biden.
And speaking of the debate, the first matchup between the two candidates was the first high-profile opportunity that both Trump and Biden had to address moderates and independents, who are likely going to determine who eventually gets elected in November. The two sparred over a variety of issues over the course of an hour and a half in Atlanta and tried to highlight things that they believed would play well with voters. Biden, for example, touted strong job numbers and sought to paint his predecessor as a convicted felon, as well as a threat to the democratic process.
The only person on this stage is a convicted felon is the man I'm looking at right now. And the fact of the matter is, what he's telling you is simply not true. The fact is that there was no effort on his part to stop what was going on up in Capitol Hill.
Meanwhile, Trump repeatedly returned to the issues of inflation and the border crisis in an attempt to show that Biden has failed the country on these two high-profile issues.
The only jobs he created are for illegal immigrants and bounce-back jobs, a bounce-back from the COVID. He has not done a good job. He's done a poor job, and inflation's killing our country. It is absolutely killing us.
Notably, the former president emerged as a clear victor in the debate. According to CNN's flash poll, 67% of respondents thought Trump won, while only 33% thought the same of Biden.
And one of the major reasons Trump was seen as the winner was that Biden's mental clarity and age proved to be the largest talking point following the debate. These questions have loomed over Biden's presidency as he has repeatedly been seen losing his footing and train of thought and speaking incoherently. The Biden campaign had presumably hoped to use the stage to put these questions to bed, but instead ramped up these concerns for most Americans. Here's one moment where Biden seems to have lost his train of thought.
Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Trump also made note of his lack of clarity.
And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
Immediately after the debate, it was reported that those within the Democratic Party were in full panic mode and discussed ways to replace the president due to his mediocre performance. Additionally, Republicans have suggested that the president's cabinet should invoke the 25th Amendment to remove Biden from office. According to a CBS poll this past weekend, 72% of Americans now believe that Biden is mentally unfit to serve as president for another 4 years.
Meanwhile, on the other side, the largest hurdle in Trump's way for the lead up to November were his mounting legal troubles. For example, in May, Trump was convicted on 34 counts of falsifying business records in what he and many Republicans have called a rigged trial.
This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. The real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people. And they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here. This was done by the Biden administration in order to wound or hurt an opponent, a political opponent. And I think it's just a disgrace. And we'll keep fighting. We'll fight till the end and we'll win.
That historic conviction drew strong and mostly predictable reactions from both Democrats and Republicans, but voters are split, especially when it comes to independents. A recent poll from Politico found 21% of independents said the conviction made them less likely to support Trump and that it would be an important factor in their vote. Although it's a bit more complicated than just that, as more than 40% of voters, including independents, question whether Trump actually received a fair trial. But still, Trump was given some good news earlier this week in regard to his January 6th trial when the Supreme Court ruled that he could not be prosecuted for any actions within his constitutional powers as president.
So, as it stands, how do Americans feel about the candidates? Well, according to the polls, former President Trump is the consistent favorite and has been since at least the fall of 2023, though the numbers vary. According to Real Clear Politics, Trump is currently leading Biden 47% to 45%, which is basically a dead heat since it's within the margin of error. But it's the swing states that matter, which make or break presidential elections. Here, Trump is leading Biden on average by more than 3 points in those key states. Trump has also a comfortable 5-point lead in Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina, and Georgia. Meanwhile, Trump has a 2-point lead in Pennsylvania and is running neck and neck in Wisconsin and Michigan.
Of course, there still exists a greater sentiment among American voters, which is that this presidential race is less than desirable. Pew Research from April of this year showed that almost half of voters, Democrats and Republicans, favored replacing both of their candidates. Another survey showed that a quarter of American voters held unfavorable views of both major party candidates, the highest in at least 3 decades. But for now, both Trump and Biden remain as the 2 primary candidates. And before, we did mention that RFK Jr. was running as an independent. It's worth noting that in most national polls, the independent candidate holds about a 10% voting block. And according to a recent Reuters poll, about 20% of voters remain undecided. So which way those voters break could actually prove to be the deciding factor in who secures the White House come November. And now we're heading up to a break, but when we return, Sam Case and Renata Kiss will continue to break down some of the major issues that will play a factor in this election.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
When a woman experiences an unplanned pregnancy, she's faced with a difficult decision. Preborn connects with life-affirming pregnancy clinics across the nation and provides them with free ultrasound sessions for expectant mothers. When a mother sees her baby on an ultrasound and hears their heartbeat, it doubles the chance she'll choose life. Visit preborn.com/life to save a baby's life.
Fear and uncertainty can cause us to hold things tightly and rely on ourselves. But during uncertain times, as believers in Christ, we are called to surrender fully to our sovereign God. Learn a biblically responsible investment strategy proven over 25 years. Keep the money God has entrusted to you out of companies that participate in things that God detests. Fully surrender. Become a Financial Issues Partner today.
Hey, and welcome back to FISM News. If you're just joining us right now, we're going through our special 2024 election coverage, looking ahead to the election this fall. We've already looked at the candidates, both Trump and Biden, so let's now move on to the issues, where, of course, the economy is king. Voters consistently tell pollsters that the economy and inflation are their top issues for 2024. It's rather unsurprising, as inflation continues to affect everything from gasoline prices to groceries and everything in between. Tack on the fact that the Federal Reserve continues to delay its interest rate cuts, and you have an American public desperate for financial relief. Other important issues, though, for voters include the border crisis. That's something we're going to touch on in a little bit here, as well as national security, abortion, and the wars in Gaza and Ukraine.
But this question of importance also varies greatly depending on who you ask. For instance, Republicans tend to be more focused on fiscal issues. According to Pew Research, 80% of Republicans say that inflation is a very big problem, whereas 46% of Democrats say the same. The same can be said for the federal deficit. 71% of Republicans find this is a huge issue compared to 35% of Democrats. The biggest noticeable difference is in illegal immigration. 78% of Republicans say that this is a huge problem, and only 27% of Democrats say the same. On the other hand, Democrats seem to be more focused on social issues such as racism and climate change. Gun violence is also a top concern for Democrats when compared to Republicans. Other concerns shared somewhat equally by Democrats and Republicans include bipartisan cooperation in government and the quality of K-12 schools.
And it's also not just who you ask, but it also depends on when you ask. For example, in January, Pew Research noted that immigration and reducing crime were growing concerns for voters. And a few months later, a Gallup survey in April named immigration as the top problem facing the U.S., beating out both the economy and inflation. In fact, Gallup found that immigration topped their list for the third month in a row by that point, which they said was the longest stretch for that topic over the past 24 years. That's really incredible. But what's also more interesting about this is that despite naming immigration as the top issue for the country, voters still said the economy was their personal priority for the election, basically cementing it as the top issue come November.
And while we're so focused on these generally important topics, why don't we see what each major candidate has to say about them? Let's start with the economy as it is seen by President Biden, the Democrat incumbent. Biden is looking into continuing defending his Bidenomics for the remainder of the year as a successful venture. This is an umbrella term used for any of his economic policies, which he claims help build the middle class from the bottom up and from the middle out. Part of his policies include investments in clean energy and various infrastructure projects around the nation. But some of his economic policies have also been attributed to the ongoing pain of inflation felt by all Americans, as we've mentioned before. This includes canceling the Keystone Pipeline early in his tenure and continuing to spend exorbitant amount of money on federal projects as well. Biden also tends to focus on employment in his presidency, specifically low unemployment. Unfortunately, his stats tend not to account for underemployed unemployed persons, the cost of living, or the immense spike in consumer debt.
And I've got to say, Renata, it's really unfortunate he went with that label, Bidenomics, because now whenever someone feels economic pain, whether it's the president's fault or not, they're going to instantly think Bidenomics is the root cause of this.
Yeah, that's not a great moniker for him. Yeah.
That's right. And unfortunately for Biden, Americans also just don't really have a lot of confidence he can fix the economy. Republicans, unsurprisingly, have been consistently down on the economy under Biden. Not only that, but Republicans are by and large more concerned about the economy, specifically inflation, than Democrats. For example, in that Pew survey, 46% of Democrats, as we said inflation is a very big problem for the country compared to 80% of Republicans. This Democrat-Republican split seems to spread across the economic spectrum for other subjects, including the federal budget and the deficit and other things like that. However, according to a Pew Research study in May, a larger than expected number of Democrats as well, they also had a rather negative opinion on Biden's economy.
And based on this overall pessimism, former President Trump certainly has a moment to seize on the economy. So what exactly are his plans? Well, Trump is not shy to blame the inflationary prices on Biden and his administration's consistent big spending. Part of his plan is to extend tax cuts and cut back on some regulations. This would be an attempt on his end to inspire consumer confidence, especially as Americans have less in savings and are accruing greater amounts of credit card debt. Trump is also looking to put focus back on international trade. Trump had previously proposed a 10% tariff on all imported goods. And as far as China is concerned, Trump reportedly is considering a 60% tariff on that nation alone. Trump will also likely use higher gasoline and grocery prices under Biden as a weapon against the current president. It is also worth noting that Trump's presidency saw wages outpacing inflation, which Biden struggled to achieve.
Meanwhile, another major issue, which is really going to be a boon for former President Donald Trump, is, of course, illegal immigration and the border crisis. Despite not taking really any meaningful action to secure the border for the better part of his presidency, Biden continues to blame Republicans for the situation, claiming earlier this year he's done pretty much everything he can do.
I've done all I can do. Just give me the power. I've asked for the very day I got in office. Give me the border patrol. Give me the people, the judges. Give me the people who can stop this and make it work for us.
Now, it should also be noted that during Biden's first days in office, he got rid of many of Trump's border policies that were working, including Remain in Mexico. Meanwhile, Republicans have been blocking a bipartisan border bill that's backed by the president. That's something that Biden was talking about in that clip you just saw. They argue that it's the Republicans that it ends up codifying many of the current problems into law. As a result, last month, President Biden decided to go around Congress and to implement some of those policies with an executive order.
Today, I'm announcing actions to bar migrants who cross our southern border unlawfully from receiving asylum. Migrants will be restricted from receiving asylum at our southern border unless they seek it after entering through an established lawful process. And those who seek to come to the United States legally, for example, by making an appointment and coming to a port of entry, asylum will still be available to them.
The rule, what it does is it suspends asylum processing between ports of entry at the border once illegal crossings reach 2,500 a day.
Under Biden, the border crisis has become a major talking point for Republicans to use against him as well. Even on those recent examples we just mentioned, Republicans are quick to say that it's just an attempt to win voters over in the upcoming election. Here's House Speaker Mike Johnson on the executive order.
It's too little, too late. Now he's trying to desperately show the American people somehow that he wants to address the issue that he himself created. We documented 64 specific executive actions that President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas at DHS took over the course of the last 3.5 years, beginning on the first day that President Biden took office to open the border wide. They did it intentionally, and it has had catastrophic effects upon our country that we'll be living with for decades to come. And now he wants to issue some sort of executive order, I guess, to show that, oh, no, he really does care about the issue. The only reason he's doing that is because the polls say that it's the biggest issue in America.
In fact, the border bill that Biden supported, President Trump actively opposed. He was instrumental in getting that bill shot down in the Senate. Trump has indicated that his return to the White House would also include the return of many of his border policies, including the Remain in Mexico initiative. He has also indicated that he would carry out the largest deportation operation in U.S. history. Pew Research shows that 62% of registered voters are in favor of such deportation efforts. All right, well, after this next break, we'll look at the other important topics that are sure to make an impact in the upcoming election. But first, let's go to Seth Udinsky for today's moment in history.
Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. Well, every first Tuesday in November, the United States holds its governmental elections. Now, depending on the year, there may be lower elections such as local or governmental or township. Others consist of elections for the Senate. And then every 4 years, the most important election in all the land occurs, where the office of the President of the United States. So how did Election Day come about in the United States, and why the first Tuesday of November? Let's jump back in time to discover the answers. Now, the spirit behind Election Day is as old as the very ideals of America itself. We live not in an absolute monarchy where a king is chosen based on divine right or familial lineage, but in a constitutional republic where the people reserve the right to elect their own leaders. The year that elections begin to take shape as we know it is actually 1845, when Congress reserved the first Monday in November as the day for federal elections. Now, the reason November was chosen is because it was immediately after the harvesting season, which meant that farmers could leave their crops to make the journey to their local voting booths, which for some would actually take several hours at least, even up to a day. Now, why was Tuesday chosen instead of Monday? Well, for many Americans, it was simply a matter of convenience. Weekends were usually inconvenient because many Americans still attended church on Sunday. Who'd have thunk of such an idea like that? And by the middle of the week, usually that was also inconvenient because Wednesdays were typically actually the days that farmers would publicly sell their crops to make a profit. Therefore, the first Tuesday in November was chosen as the official election day of the United States. Now, Election Day has been the topic of much controversy in recent years, especially with the infamous influx of mail-in ballots in the 2020 election between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, an election that took place while the country was still heavily mired in the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns. Still, the day is a reminder of the uniqueness of the American experience, where ordinary citizens hold power, tiny power, but power nonetheless, over the future of their country. Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History.
Are you tired of the chaos? There are a lot of things that make noise, but only a few that truly matter. As a parent, I want to leave something that will last for a long time.
You invest $300 a month on slowly free by the time you retire.
Not just an inheritance of money, but a legacy of godly values.
Here at Financial Issues, we want to help you grow your money, but our main goal is to help you honor God with the money that He's given you.
Invest your money in a God-honoring way. Go to financialissues.org.
I was sobbing. It was a cry for prayer for God. I'm so sorry, please. So I got on the internet and I just started seeing like abortion pill reversal, and I found a hotline number. We're gonna get this started. It's gonna seem like a lot, but it's gonna be so fast, and it's because you only have a certain amount of time left. It's gonna be okay. We got this. We're gonna try to fix this for you and make sure you know you're good and the baby's good. Don't worry. And when I came here, my heart was so warm. Other than Planned Parenthood, where I was very cold and I was lost, and I just felt like I could have been, it was just terrible. And to know that Compass Care could tell me something different and could reverse a medication like that, that's amazing. That somebody would go as hard as if it was their children to make sure your child is gonna be alive and stay safe, So I want a lot of people to know it's possible. You can save your baby. You can reverse that abortion.
And welcome back to FISM News. I'm Renata Kiss. Well, let's continue our coverage of major topics sure to play a role in this year's election. Outside of the U.S., the wars in Ukraine and Israel are also going to affect our elections. The long-lasting war in Ukraine continues to see U.S. involvement, at least through the provision of military aid. Biden has continually supported Ukraine with billions of dollars and multiple deliveries of weapons and ammo. But Americans are beginning to tire of U.S. involvement in the war. According to Pew Research, 31% of Americans say the U.S. is providing too much support. That number is mostly comprised of Republican voters when compared to Democrat voters on that topic. Trump has previously commented that he wants to negotiate an end to the war because people on both sides are dying. This all comes as Russian President Vladimir Putin continues to sign security agreements with other nations, including North Korea and Vietnam, fueling concerns of a widening war.
But it's not just the war in Ukraine, as the war in Gaza has President Biden's hands tied in a rather big way, as Biden has tried to walk a very thin line when it comes to helping Israel. His administration says it does support Israel's campaign against Hamas following the October 7th terror attack, and at times has even expressed understanding about civilian casualties given Hamas's record of using human shields. But at the same time, the Biden administration continues to pressure Israel to slow walk its campaign and has even withheld certain military aid following Israel's invasion of Rafah in southern Gaza, something Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described as inconceivable at the time. But on the flip side, back here in the U.S., Biden also has to deal with protesters across the country, left-wing protesters calling for him to withdraw support from Israel. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, he's taken a more definitive stance, saying Israel needs to finish what they started and get it over with fast.
And on the cultural end of things, abortion will also be playing a major role in American elections this year. The overturning of Roe v. Wade has resulted in heated debate across the nation. As states continue enacting their own laws on the matter, the question still comes back to the federal government. Democrats, including the Biden administration, are hoping to capitalize on this problem. For the most part, Democrats have campaigned for bringing back abortion under federal protection. Either that or they are attacking Republicans for their flip-flop nature on the issue. Republicans were quick to praise the end of Roe v. Wade in 2022, but since then we've seen more nuanced laws and bills dealing with everything from IVF to abortions under extreme circumstances.
Now, the GOP does still remain a pro-life party, but these disagreements over these nuances are confusing the party's message on abortion for 2024. Some states like Florida and Georgia have banned abortions after only 6 weeks, while other states like Texas and Louisiana, they've completely banned abortions except for limited exceptions. But while trying to figure out their own state policies, some Republicans have been considering to going a step further, floating national restrictions of about 15 weeks. It's an idea that Donald Trump has repeatedly shot down, telling congressional Republicans in mid-June that they need to speak correctly about the issue, which to him means leaving it up to the states.
My view is now that we have abortion where everybody wanted it from a legal standpoint, the states will determine by vote or legislation or perhaps both, and whatever they decide must be the law of the land, in this case, the law of the state.
That was Trump speaking on the issue back in April, but we should be honest, his stance has created a bit of a rift with pro-lifers, with some pro-life groups accusing him of going soft on abortion.
Well, that's our program for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and please visit FISMnews.tv for more content.
That's right. We'll be covering more and more election news as we go on further in the year, so be sure to also follow us on social media as well for those updates. Thank you so much. God bless, and we'll see you next time.